It all started for Fitzroy at this hotel, the Brunswick Hotel in Brunswick Street, Fitzroy, on September the 26th, 1883, when a public meeting was held with the aim of forming a senior football team to represent the suburb. The hotel still stands, but now trades as the Old Colonial Inn. The meeting was called by a Mr. George Toms, who, with many locals, agreed it was time Fitzroy had its own football team, so it could compete with other suburbs for the Victorian Football Association Premiership. Many of the leading players of the local Normanby Junior Football Club joined the Maroon and Blue Pioneers. Setting up a new club wasn't easy. Indeed, Fitzroy's second secretary, Charles Cock, and one of its early players lamented, "Even our own residents ridiculed the idea of Fitzroy competing with senior teams. Such encouragement as, 'How many weeks will you last?' and 'Where will Fitzroy be at the end of the season?' was offered." On the day of the team's first game, the Fitzroy City Brass Band marched down Brunswick Street from the Rob Roy to the ground, where it played selections during the afternoon. The game on April 26th against the Junior Richmond Union team ended in a draw. But it was not long before Fitzroy's first team, led by Paddy P.G. McShane, was to capture the imagination of the suburb and earn the respect of the football world. On May 31st, the Maroons defeated one of the colony's oldest clubs, Melbourne, and the following week defeated the powerful Carlton team. Fitzroy was established. Mid-season, Fitzroy recruited a brilliant player from the South Ballarat club, his name John Worrell. Worrell was to replace McShane as captain late in the following season. The stocky rover was to lay the foundations for Fitzroy's first flag. Worrell, who was also a gifted cricketer, was later to coach Carlton to 3 consecutive premierships and Essendon to 2 flags. When Worrell stood down in 1892, he handed over the captaincy to the brilliant Tom Banks, who was to lead Fitzroy to its first and only VFA premiership in 1895. By the time the league was formed at the end of 1896, Fitzroy was a power in Victorian football. The Maroons were out to take the flag in 1898 and again in 1899. Fitzroy's teams in those years became the first to win back-to-back VFL premierships. In 1900, Fitzroy's captain Alex Sloane was confident of victory as he and Melbourne skipper Dick Wardell tossed before the game. Melbourne not only won the toss, but also the game. The early years of the century were years of remarkable success for the Maroons. The club boasted champions such as rover Percy Trotter, who joined Fitzroy in 1901 and was to play 109 games. Later, Trotter's ability was to be compared with that of Hayden Bunton. Here's a rare photograph of the 2 champions together at the Football Carnival in Perth in 1937. One commentator said of Trotter, "When you saw Percy Trotter as a rover, the embodiment of graceful movement, you by no means saw all of Trotter. He was like half a dozen players. I've never seen a more brilliantly versatile player in the game." Fitzroy also had the talented Herbert boxer Milne. The champion follower played 122 games between 1902 and 1910. He's seen here against Geelong in one of his first games. In 1903, Fitzroy defeated Collingwood in the first VFL game for premiership points played in Sydney. It was also the first game in which players wore numbers. Fitzroy won the game, but in the grand final later in the year, Collingwood returned the compliment. But the Maroons were to make amends in 1904 when they defeated Carlton in the grand final. In 1905, Fitzroy again won the flag, this time against traditional rivals Collingwood. The following year, Fitzroy was back in the grand final, but was defeated by Carlton. Fitzroy would not feature in the finals for another 7 years. It wasn't until 1913 that Fitzroy was again able to taste premiership success. The 1913 premiership win was due largely to a dynamic combination of guys with the unlikely names of Percy Peratt and Jimmy Freak. Freak would remain close to goal, and according to witnesses, Peratt would stab past the ball to Freak with deadly accuracy. The 2 champions were to dominate Fitzroy's attack for the next decade. Fitzroy supporters nicknamed the 1913 team The Unbeatables. Finishing the season on top of the ladder, Fitzroy defeated St Kilda in the grand final by 13 points. Although Fitzroy made the finals again in 1914 and 1915, it was not until 1916 that it again won the flag. 1916 is the only year a team has won the premiership after also winning the wooden spoon. The First World War had driven all but Fitzroy, Collingwood, Carlton and Richmond out of the competition. Fitzroy played poorly in the 12-week-long home and away season and managed only 2 wins. But as there were only 4 teams, they still had a place in the 4. The team stormed through the finals to beat Carlton in the grand final. In 1922, the club was to field possibly its best side of the era. The team boasted the likes of Percy Peratt and Jimmy Freak, Len Wiggraft, Goldie Collins and Stan Milan. The grand final against Collingwood attracted 50,000 people. At the end of the tightly fought match, Fitzroy emerged victors by just 11 points. The win gave Fitzroy 7 premierships and put it 2 flags clear of Collingwood and Carlton. Fitzroy was again in the grand final in 1923, but was defeated by Essendon. The Maroons were not in the finals for another 19 years. By the end of the 1920s, the club was to look to recruits to help lift it up the ladder. At the start of the Great Depression in 1930, Fitzroy outbid most VFL clubs for the signature of the brilliant Albury player Hayden Bunton. However, Bunton was stopped by the league from playing in 1930 after he was found guilty of offering his services to the highest bidder. But in 1931, when the champion finally made his VFL debut, his brilliance stunned the football world and won the Brownlow Medal.